The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and wilted lilies. The bouquet clutched by Clare, my husband Howard's secretary, mocking my fading life. Her beige skirt suit was pristine, her hair curled in trendy waves, starkly contrasting my frail form tethered to tubes. She leaned close, her breath warm against my ear, and whispered, "Susie, I used your exam results to get into college." The words pierced sharper than the pain in my chest. As my vision blurred, I saw her smile, cold, triumphant. My heart monitor flatlined, and the world went dark. 3 months later, in the autumn of 1976, Howard married Clare in our village of Oak Tree, a rural outpost in northern China where city youth like them had been sent during the Cultural Revolution. The news reached me in the void, a cruel echo of betrayal. Our family and friends gathered under the gnarled willows and sighed with relief. "Director Howard deserves an educated wife," they murmured. As if my years of toil meant nothing, he only married Susie back then because he was stuck in the countryside. He and Clare would have been together long ago if the college exams hadn't been suspended. My elderly parents, once my anchors, held Clare's hands like she was their daughter. "Our Susie had no prospects," my mother said, her voice heavy with shame. "We feared she'd drag the kids down, but Clare, valedictorian, cultured, she'll raise them right." My son, barely a teenager, called Clare Mommy with a warmth he'd never shown me. The village saw Clare as Howard's proper match, a city girl who'd risen above the mud of rural life, while I was the backward peasant who'd trapped him. The injustice burned, even in death. I'd loved Howard from the moment he arrived in Oak Tree, a city youth with sharp eyes and dreams too big for our fields. During the Cultural Revolution, when Mao's policies scattered millions of urban students to rural re-education, Howard and Clare landed in our village. I was smitten, ignoring Clare's whispered confessions of love to him. I used every charm, cooking his favorite dumplings, mending his clothes, to win his hand. But Clare, cunning and ambitious, stole my college exam results in 1977, the year the exams were reinstated after a decade-long ban. She soared to university while I stayed behind, raising our son alone, believing Howard's promises of a better future. For 30 years, they worked side by side, Clare dining at my table, outlasting me, inheriting the life I'd built. In the darkness of death, my regrets swirled. I'd given everything to Howard, my youth, my dreams, only to be erased. Clare's ambition wasn't just greed. It was a calculated theft of my identity, my potential. Howard's betrayal wasn't just infidelity. It was a choice to let me fade while he planned a life with her. The village's scorn, my parents' shame, and my son's rejection stemmed from a lie Clare had spun, one Howard had upheld. I wanted to scream, to claw back what was mine, but I was nothing now, a ghost in the void. Then a warmth enveloped me, like sunlight breaking through the fog. A soft yet ancient voice whispered, "You've been wronged, Susie. The wheel of fate turns again. Take your chance." My eyes snapped open. I was in our clay-roofed house, the air thick with the scent of straw and wood smoke. Red double happiness symbols, faded from my wedding day, clung to the paper-paned windows. It was spring 1977, months before the college entrance exam, that would change everything. My hands, no longer frail, trembled with life. I touched my face, young, unlined, alive. I was reborn. The realization hit like a thunderclap. The Cultural Revolution's chaos still gripped China, but whispers of the exam's return offered a lifeline out of rural toil. For village girls like me, it was a rare chance to prove our worth in a world that dismissed us. For Howard and Clare, it was a ticket back to the city, their rightful place. But I knew the truth this time. Clare's theft, Howard's duplicity. The mysterious voice, perhaps a karmic force, or a forgotten deity, had given me a second chance to live and fight. I stood, my heart pounding with a mix of rage and resolve. The village outside bustled with life. Oxen lowing, children laughing, the clatter of hoes in the fields. My healthy parents were likely at the production team's office. Howard was somewhere out there, helping Clare as he always had. But I wasn't the naive girl who'd begged for his love. I was a woman reborn, armed with the pain of my past and the clarity of betrayal. Clare had stolen my future once, and Howard had let her. This time, I'd expose their lies, reclaim my life, and leave them in the dust of their deceit. The morning sun filtered through the paper-paned windows, casting frail light across the clay floor of our home in Oak Tree Village. I sat on the edge of the wooden bed, my hands tracing the coarse quilt, grounding myself in this reborn life. It was spring 1977, and the Cultural Revolution's grip on China still held, though whispers of the college entrance exam's reinstatement stirred hope among the sent-down youth. For me, Susie, a rural girl reborn with the scars of betrayal, it was a chance to rewrite my stolen future. But first, I had to face the ghosts of my past. Howard, my husband, and Clare, his city-bred confidant who'd taken everything. The door creaked open, and my mother stormed in, her face etched scornfully. "Enough with the daydreaming, Susie," she snapped, tossing a broom at my feet. "I know you're jealous of Clare, that educated city girl, signing up for the college exam to copy her, huh? You'll never match her brains or her class." Her words stung, echoing the village's disdain in my past life. In that timeline, I'd loved Howard unquestioningly, a charming city youth sent to our village for re-education during Mao's upheaval. I'd ignored Claire's whispered confessions of love to him, using every rural charm, sewing his shirts, cooking his favorite millet porridge, to win his hand. But sharp and ambitious Clare had stolen my exam results, earning the province's top score while I failed, tethered to the fields with our son. I clenched my fists, the memory of Claire's final confession in my dying moments burning fresh. "I used your exam results to get into college." She'd dined at my table, smiled at my son, and built a life with Howard for over 30 years while I toiled in obscurity. Howard, complicit, had chosen her elegance over my loyalty, letting me fade. My mother's scorn now wasn't just ignorance, it was a symptom of Claire's lie, painting herself as the cultured ideal and me as the backward peasant. The Cultural Revolution had deepened this divide, exalting city youth as intellectuals while dismissing villagers like me as uncultured. I swallowed my rage, meeting my mother's gaze. "I'm taking the exam, Ma, not for Clare, but for me." She huffed, muttering about my folly, and left. Alone, I paced the small room, the weight of my past life pressing down. In that life, I'd been naive, believing Howard's promises of love as he and Clare attended the same university, their city dreams intertwining. After graduation, they worked together, their bond unspoken but undeniable. I'd raised our son and sent letters through Danny, the village secretary's son, begging Howard to visit. None reached him. Danny, smitten with Clare, had delivered them to her instead. Claire's ambition wasn't just theft, but a calculated erasure of my worth. Howard's betrayal wasn't just neglect. It was a choice to let her shine while I dimmed. I stopped at the window, gazing at the fields where sent-down youth like Howard and Clare labored alongside locals. The Cultural Revolution had upended lives, sending urban students to rural re-education to bridge class divides. But it often bred resentment. Villagers envied the city youth's education. The youths scorned rural life. The 1977 exam, a rare chance to return to the city, heightened tensions. Everyone knew a high score could mean escape. For Clare, it was a path to reclaim her rightful place. It was a chance for Howard to fulfill his city dreams, perhaps with Clare. For me, it was justice. A knock startled me. My father, the production team leader, poked his head in. "Susie, Howard's out helping Clare again." "Are you sure about this exam? It's not for girls like us." His concern masked doubt, a reflection of the village's bias. In my past life, he'd favored Clare, praising her as a valedictorian after my death. Now, I saw his hesitation as a chance. "I'm sure, Pa," I said firmly. "I'll show them what I can do." He nodded, unconvinced, and left. I sank onto the bed, my resolve hardening. The mysterious voice that had granted me this rebirth, a karmic whisper in the void, hadn't just given me life. It had given me clarity. Claire's theft wasn't just personal, but a symptom of a society that valued city polish over rural grit. Howard's complicity wasn't just weakness, but a betrayal of the vows we'd made under those red double happiness symbols. I wasn't the lovesick girl who'd begged for his affection. I was a woman reborn, fueled by pain and purpose.
Outside, the village hummed. Oxen lowed, hoes clanged, and children's laughter mingled with the wind. Howard was out there, likely weeding Clare's plot to free her for study. I'd have run to him, pleading for attention in my past life. Now I saw him for what he was, a man torn between duty to me and desire for Clare's city-bred allure.
With her calculated charm, Clare was already plotting to steal my score again. But this time, I'd be ready. I'd outsmart them, expose their lies, and reclaim the life they'd stolen. Not just for me, but for every village girl dismissed as less. The midday sun beat down on Oak Tree Village, its rays glinting off the rice paddies where sent-down youth and locals toiled side by side. I stood by the window inside our clay-roofed home, watching Howard trudge back from the fields, his shirt streaked with dirt. It was spring 1977, and the reinstated college entrance exam loomed, a beacon of escape from the Cultural Revolution's rural exile. For me, Susie, reborn with the truth of Howard and Clare's betrayal, it was more, a chance to unravel their lies and reclaim my stolen future. The karmic voice that had granted me this second life whispered in my memory, "Take your chance. Today, I would." Howard pushed open the door, his brow furrowed. "Susie, the exam's in a few days, and you're still lazing around?" His tone carried the same condescension I'd endured in my past life when I'd begged for his approval. Then I'd have wilted under his gaze, promising to study harder. I saw him clearly, a city youth torn between duty to me, his village wife, and his bond with Clare, the educated girl he believed deserved him. In my past life, he'd helped Clare with her studies while I worked the fields, raising our son alone. His dirt-streaked clothes told me he'd been at it again, weeding her plot to free her for books. I brushed past him, my voice cold. "I've got work to do." His eyes widened, unaccustomed to my indifference. In my past life, Clare had stolen my exam results, soaring to university while I stayed behind. The complicit Howard had let her, their city dreams intertwining over 30 years. Now, reborn, I knew their game. Clare's ambition to reclaim her urban life. Howard's guilt for a past life where he'd failed her. But I wasn't the naive girl who'd cooked his dumplings. I was a strategist. And my first move was to disrupt their cozy alliance. I grabbed a hoe and headed to the production team's office, a low building buzzing with villagers assigning tasks. The Cultural Revolution had made rural work a proving ground, where city youth like Howard and Clare were meant to shed their bourgeois ways. Instead, it bred resentment. Villagers saw them as privileged while they scorned the fields. My father, the team leader, lounged in the shade, smoking a hand-rolled cigarette. "Pa," I said, "give Howard the brick-hauling job." He gaped. Brick-hauling? For little Howard? The job was grueling, hauling clay bricks for the commune's new kiln, but it earned high work points, rumored to boost exam applications. "It's for his good," I insisted, my tone firm. "More points, maybe even exam bonuses. He's my husband. Why would I harm him?" In my past life, my father had given Howard light tasks, letting him help Clare while I toiled. I used his trust in me, his rural daughter, to shift the board. The exam wasn't just a test, but a ticket out of the countryside, a chance to escape the revolution's forced labor. For Howard, it meant returning to the city with Clare. For me, it meant justice. My father scratched his head, swayed by the mention of college, and nodded. "All right, Susie, for Howard's future." That evening, the production team gathered under the village's central willow. My father announced the job change, his voice carrying over the murmurs. Howard stood among the sent-down youth, his face stiffening but didn't object. Clare, nearby, clutched her shawl, her eyes darting to him. The villagers whispered. Brick hauling was tough, not the cushy work Howard usually got. I caught a flicker of doubt in their gazes, a crack in their blind faith in the educated city pair. The Cultural Revolution had taught us to question privilege, and I'd used that to my advantage. Later, I slipped behind the grain shed, where shadows hid me. Clare's voice, low and tearful, reached my ears. "Howard, brick hauling will exhaust you. We both need to study." Her plea wasn't just concern, but desperation to keep her ally. Howard's reply was steady, almost resigned. "I'm confident about the exam, Clare. Focus on your revision." His tone hinted at more profound guilt, as if he owed her from another life. I smirked silently. Howard, reborn like me, thought he could balance his duty to me with his loyalty to Clare. He was wrong. My lips curled into a cold smile as I retreated to our house. This move wasn't just about tiring Howard, but about exposing their bond, planting seeds of doubt in the village. In my past life, I'd been blind to their closeness, believing Howard's excuses. Now I saw Clare's reliance on him as her weakness, and Howard's willingness to help as his. The exam was weeks away, and every brick he hauled would pull him further from her side. My father, still loyal to me, would ensure the job stuck. Already skeptical of city youth, the village would start questioning Clare's scholarly facade. I lit an oil lamp, its flicker casting shadows on the clay walls. The pain of my past life, Clare's theft, Howard's neglect, my parents' shame, fueled me. But I wasn't just angry. I was calculated, driven by the karmic chance to right a wrong. The Cultural Revolution had taught me resilience, the exam offered opportunity, and my rebirth gave me foresight. Howard and Clare thought they could replay their old script. They didn't know I was rewriting it, line by line, with their flaws as my ink. The summer sun scorched Oak Tree Village, its heat relentless on the fields where sent-down youth and locals labored. It was June 1977, weeks before the reinstated college entrance exam, a lifeline out of the Cultural Revolution's rural exile. I, Susie, reborn with the truth of Howard and Clare's betrayal, stood in the shade of our clay-roofed home, watching the village buzz with routine. My first move, assigning Howard the grueling brick-hauling job, had set the stage. The karmic voice that granted me this second chance echoed faintly. Take your chance. Today, the consequences would unfold, and I'd nudge the village's blind faith in Clare toward doubt. Howard had been hauling bricks for days, his city-bred frame unaccustomed to the strain. I'd seen him stagger home, sweat-soaked, while Clare, freed from fieldwork, pored over books in the youth dormitory. In my past life, I'd have pitied him, cooking broth to ease his fatigue. I saw his choice to help Clare as a betrayal, his reborn guilt tying him to her. Clare's ambition, masking her theft of my exam results, relied on his support. My father, the production team leader, had enforced the job change at my urging, believing it would boost Howard's exam chances. The village, steeped in Cultural Revolution rhetoric about labor-purifying intellectuals, watched closely, their reverence for city youth like Howard and Clare fraying. A commotion broke my thoughts. Villagers streamed toward our house, their voices a chaotic hum. At the center, 4 men carried a makeshift stretcher, and on it lay Howard, pale as ash, his eyes closed. My heart flickered, not with love, but with the thrill of my plan's success. The crowd parted, and Clare burst from the youth dormitory, her white dress fluttering. "Howard!" she cried, her voice sharp with panic. I'd have rushed to his side, a dutiful wife in my past life. Now I stepped forward, grabbing her arm. "He's not dead, Clare. Calm down." Her eyes flashed, accusation raw. "You did this, Susie. You knew he needed to study, yet you pushed him to the brickyard." Her words drew murmurs from the crowd, some sympathetic, others skeptical. The Cultural Revolution had bred distrust of city youth who shirked hard labor, and Clare's outburst and Howard's collapse stirred unease. I tilted my head, feigning confusion. Plenty of educated youths haul bricks and study. Why was Howard weeding your fields yesterday? The question hung like smoke, and the villagers' murmurs grew sharper. A burly farmer, old Jang, scratched his chin. "Yeah, I saw Howard and Clare's plot. Ain't that women's work?" A woman nearby nodded. Clare's always got him running her errands. Scared Susie might outscore her? The crowd's tone shifted, their blind faith in Clare's scholarly aura cracking. In my past life, they'd praised her as a valedictorian, dismissing me as a backward peasant. My calculated move, exposing Howard's overwork, had turned their gaze on her. Clare's face tightened, her hands twisting her dress. I didn't ask him to," she stammered, but her voice lacked conviction. I stepped closer, my voice steady but laced with challenge. "Howard's my husband. If he's exhausted, it could be because he's been studying for 2. The crowd's eyes widened, whispers rippling. Clare's ambition wasn't just personal. It was a city girl's entitlement, using Howard to secure her escape from rural toil.
Howard, still unconscious, was carried inside, and I followed, leaving Clare to face the village's scrutiny. My father, hovering near the stretcher, muttered, "Susie, was this too much?" In my past life, he'd favored Clare after my death. Now, I squeezed his arm. "He'll recover, Pa. This'll teach him to focus." Inside, I sat by Howard's bedside, his breathing shallow. A pang of guilt stirred. He was still my husband, his face once the center of my world. But the memory of his betrayal, choosing Clare's city dreams over me, hardened my resolve. He was reborn too, I suspected, his guilt for Clare driving him to help her. Why then, no remorse for me? The Cultural Revolution had taught me resilience, forcing rural girls to prove their worth against superior city youth. The exam was my battleground, and Howard's collapse was calculated to weaken Clare's grip. As dusk fell, I slipped outside, where villagers lingered, gossiping. "Clare's no scholar if she needs Howard's help," one said. Another snorted. "Susie's got guts, making her man work." The shift was subtle but real. The village, shaped by years of Revolution-era class struggles, questioned the city pair's privilege. My mother, passing by, frowned. "You're stirring trouble, Susie." She'd shamed me for lacking Clare's culture in my past life. Now I met her gaze. "I'm doing what's right, Ma. For me." She paused, then walked away, her silence a crack in her bias. Back inside, Howard stirred, his eyes fluttering open. "Susie," he rasped, confusion clouding his face. I leaned close, my voice low. "Rest, Howard. You've been carrying too much." The double meaning hung between us. His labor, his loyalty to Clare. My plan was working, but this was just the beginning. Clare's facade was crumbling, and Howard's reborn confidence was shaken. The exam loomed, and I'd tighten the noose around their lies with every step, using the village's doubt as my weapon. Twilight draped Oak Tree Village in a soft purple haze, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and straw. Inside our clay-roofed home, I sat under the flicker of an oil lamp. A worn exam prep book opened before me. It was June 1977, and the college entrance exam, reinstated after a decade of Cultural Revolution chaos, loomed weeks away. For me, Susie, reborn with the truth of Howard and Clare's betrayal, it was a battlefield to reclaim my stolen future. Howard's collapse at the brickyard, orchestrated by my calculated job change, had sown doubt about Clare's scholarly facade in the village. The karmic voice that granted me this second life whispered, "Take your chance." I'd solidify my resolve tonight, fueled by the era's pressures and my awakening. The Cultural Revolution had shattered lives, sending city youth like Howard and Clare to rural re-education to erase their bourgeois roots. In Oak Tree, they were revered and resented, seen as educated elites, yet expected to toil like locals. The 1977 exam was a rare escape, a chance to return to urban life, or, for village girls like me, to prove our worth against a system that dismissed us as backward. In my past life, I'd failed the exam, my results stolen by Clare, who soared to university with Howard. I'd toiled in the fields, raising our son while they built a city life together. My parents had praised Clare as a valedictorian after my death, ashamed of my rural roots. Now reborn, I wasn't just fighting for myself, but for every girl the revolution had overlooked. Howard stirred on the bed, his face still pale from his collapse. He'd been resting since the villagers carried him home, their whispers of Clare's reliance on him echoing in my ears. I'd have nursed him with broth in my past life, desperate for his love. I saw his choice to help Clare as a betrayal, his reborn guilt tying him to her. I closed the book, my fingers tracing its worn cover. The exam wasn't just a test. It was a mirror reflecting the era's class divides. Clare's ambition to reclaim her city status, Howard's desire to fulfill a past life promise to her, and my quest for justice collided in its pages. The door creaked, and Howard sat up, his eyes heavy with fatigue. "Susie," he said, his voice hoarse. "Why the brickyard?" "The exam's tough. You know I need to study." His tone held a reborn certainty, as if he recalled the questions from our past life. In that timeline, he'd used my devotion to keep me at arm's length, citing study needs to avoid closeness. I met his gaze, my voice steady.
I work the fields every day, Howard. Who's earning our points? I'm not like Clare, with others falling over to help. My words were a jab, exposing his favoritism. He frowned, a flicker of unease crossing his face. Claire's mother is sick, Susie. If she doesn't pass, she might never return to the city. I'm helping for her family's sake. His excuse, rehearsed from our past life, rang hollow. Why did his reborn heartache for Claire's family, but not for me, his wife? The Cultural Revolution had taught me to question such privilege. City youth like Howard often cloaked self-interest in noble causes. I scoffed, leaning closer. I'll earn my way, Howard. Unlike some, I don't need handouts to prove I'm enough. His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He'd dismissed my exam efforts in my past life, urging me to focus on motherhood while he strolled campus with Clare. Now I saw his guilt for her as a weakness, a crack I'd widen. You should rest, I said, standing. The brickyard's tough, but it's what we village folk do. My words carried the era's weight. Rural resilience against urban entitlement. Howard lay back, his silence a concession. I stepped outside, the night air cool against my skin. The village slept, its thatched roofs silhouetted against the stars. In the distance, the youth dormitory glowed faintly, where Clare likely studied, her ambition fueled by my stolen chance. The revolution had promised equality, but deepened divides. City youth were intellectuals, while we were peasants. My mother's scorn, my father's doubt, and even the villagers' initial awe of Clare stemmed from this. But Howard's collapse had shifted their view, and I'd fanned those flames. My parents, still swayed by Clare's city polish, would soon see the truth. My father's trust in me, shown by enforcing Howard's job, was a start. My mother's silence after our last talk hinted at change. I returned to the lamp, opening the book again. Each equation and character was a step toward justice, not just for me, but for every rural girl told she wasn't enough. The pain of my past life, Clare's theft, Howard's neglect, my son's rejection, burned, but it no longer consumed me. I was reborn, not just by a karmic whim, but by a deeper force, perhaps the collective spirit of those the revolution had silenced. Howard thought he could balance his duty to me with his loyalty to Clare. Clare thought she could steal my future again. They were wrong. I'd study, scheme, and win, turning their desires against them in the exam's crucible. The moon hung low over Oak Tree Village, casting silver light on the thatched roofs and winding paths. It was early July 1977, 3 days before the college entrance exam, a rare chance to escape the Cultural Revolution's rural exile. I, Susie, reborn with the bitter truth of Howard and Clare's betrayal, moved silently through the shadows, my heart steady with purpose. Howard's collapse at the brickyard, my calculated strike, had turned the village's gaze on Clare, her scholarly aura now suspect. The karmic voice that had granted me this second life echoed faintly. Take your chance. I'd uncover the next piece of their deceit tonight, tightening the noose around their lies. The Cultural Revolution had upended China, scattering city youth like Howard and Clare to villages like ours for re-education. The 1977 exam, reinstated after a decade of educational chaos, was a lifeline, especially for sent-down youth desperate to reclaim urban lives. For rural girls like me, it was a defiant act, a chance to challenge the era's bias that deemed us inferior. In my past life, Clare had stolen my exam results, earning the province's top score while I failed, leaving me to raise our son alone. The complicit Howard had joined her at university, their bond unbroken for 30 years. Now, reborn, I knew Clare's ambition wasn't just greed. It was a ruthless bid to erase me. Howard's guilt, reborn like me, drove him to aid her, blind to my worth. I crept toward the village secretary's squat building near the communal granary. Clare's behavior had grown furtive, her late-night outings suspicious. In my past life, I'd been too trusting, believing her study sessions were innocent. I saw her for what she was, a thief plotting to steal my future again. The village was quiet, save for the rustle of leaves and distant dog barks. I hid behind a stack of straw bales, my breath shallow, as voices drifted from the secretary's backyard. Danny, the secretary's son, spoke in a hushed, eager tone. Don't worry, Clare. My fourth uncle handles the test papers in town. He'll swap yours with the top students, Susie's. My blood ran cold, the memory of Claire's dying confession. I used your exam results, burning fresh. She'd done it before and planned to repeat the theft. Danny, smitten with Clare, was her pawn, just as he'd been in my past life, sabotaging my letters to Howard to curry her favor. Claire's voice, low and bitter, cut through the night. Too bad it's that village girl again. She doesn't deserve it. Her words stung, revealing not just ambition but envy, a city girl's resentment of my potential. In the Revolution's class struggles, city youth like Clare were exalted as intellectuals, yet she feared a rural nobody outshining her. I clenched my fists, the straw biting my palms. Danny, oblivious to her disdain, chuckled. Susie's no match for you, Clare. My uncle's got it covered. His blind devotion was pathetic, a mirror of my past naivety with Howard. I'd trusted him, only to be betrayed. Now I'd turn their greed against them. I slipped away, my mind racing. Claire's scheme was clear. She'd rely on Danny's connections to steal my score, just as she had before. Howard, likely aware of his reborn memory, supported her studies, perhaps expecting the same outcome. But I wasn't the same Susie. The Cultural Revolution had taught me resilience, forging rural girls into survivors against urban privilege. The exam was my weapon, and Claire's plan was my opportunity. I'd let her think she'd win, only to spring a trap that would expose her fraud. Back home, I lit the oil lamp, its glow dancing on the clay walls. Howard slept, his breathing steady, recovered from his collapse, but still weakened. I sat at the table, my exam book open, though my thoughts were on strategy. In my past life, I'd studied in vain, my efforts stolen. Now I studied purposefully, not just to pass, but to outmaneuver. Claire's envy, Danny's infatuation, Howard's guilt, they were threads I'd weave into their downfall. My parents, still swayed by Claire's city polish, would soon see her true face. My father's trust in me, shown by enforcing Howard's job, was a foundation. My mother's recent silence hinted at doubt. The village's shifting mood, sparked by Howard's collapse, was my ally. The revolution's rhetoric of equality had made locals wary of city youth who shirked labor, and Claire's reliance on Howard had raised eyebrows. I'd be a fan of skepticism, letting Claire's scheme unravel publicly. Danny, a secondary player, would face his reckoning. His unquestioning loyalty to Clare would cost him, just as it had sabotaged me before. The karmic force that reborn me wasn't just chance. It was justice, a call to right the wrongs of a system that favored the privileged. I closed the book, my resolve ironclad. The exam was days away, and Claire's plan to steal my score was set. But I'd be ready, turning her ambition into her undoing. Howard thought he could replay his past life balancing me and Clare. Clare thought she could erase me again. They didn't know I was reborn, not just to live, but to fight. The village, the exam, and the revolution's tensions were my stage, and I'd make Claire's lies the star of her disgrace. The morning of the college entrance exam dawned crisp and clear over Oak Tree Village. The July 1977 sky a rare blue. The Cultural Revolution's shadow lingered, but the reinstated exam, a beacon after a decade of educational void, drew sent-down youth and locals alike to the town's schoolhouse. I, Susie, reborn with the truth of Howard and Claire's betrayal, walked the dirt path with a steady heart, my exam book tucked under my arm. Overheard 3 nights ago, Claire's scheme to steal my score was my weapon. The karmic voice that had granted me this second life whispered, "Take your chance." Today, I'd spring a trap to expose her fraud, using the exam's crucible to shatter her facade. The schoolhouse buzzed with nervous energy, its wooden desks scarred from years of disuse. The Cultural Revolution had shuttered universities, exalting labor over learning. Still, the 1977 exam promised escape, back to cities for youth like Howard and Clare, or a rare chance for rural girls like me to defy the backward label. In my past life, Clare had stolen my results, soaring to university with Howard while I languished in the fields, raising our son. Her bitter words, "Too bad it's that village girl again," revealed her envy, a city girl's fear of my potential. Howard, reborn like me, supported her, his guilt from a past life closing his eyes to my worth. Now I'd turn their greed against them.
I took my seat inside the exam room, Howard in front and Clare to my left. Howard's posture was calm, his pen poised, his reborn memory likely recalling every question from our past life. Clare radiated confidence, her eyes darting to me briefly, smug with Danny's promise to swap our papers. Danny, the village secretary's son, was her pawn, smitten and eager to please.
In my past life, he'd sabotaged my letters to Howard, ensuring Clare's hold. Now, I'd use their plan to ruin her. I opened the test, and the questions were familiar from my reborn studies. But instead of answering correctly, I filled the sheet with deliberately wrong answers. A zero-score trap for Clare's theft. Each pen stroke was a calculated risk, my heart pounding with the thrill of deception. The revolution had taught me cunning, rural girls learning to navigate a world that dismissed us. Clare, thinking she'd claim my score, would inherit a failure. Howard, oblivious, scribbled confidently, his reborn advantage clear. Clare's occasional glances, laced with smugness, only fueled my resolve. I finished early, my answer sheet a mosaic of errors, and left the room, my face neutral. The trap was set. Clare's ambition would be her undoing. That evening, the village gathered for a feast in our courtyard, my father's gesture to celebrate the exam's end. Tables groaned with pork and rice wine, the air thick with chatter. The Cultural Revolution's class tensions simmered. Villagers envied the sent-down youth's shot at urban life, while locals like me were mocked for daring to compete. Howard recovered from his brickyard collapse and sat radiant, his reborn certainty of success evident. In a clean cotton dress, Clare basked in premature praise, villagers toasting her scholarly future. "Clare's bound for the city," one said, raising a glass. "No more fields for her." I sat quietly, my chopsticks idle, as the crowd's bias stung. In my past life, they'd dismissed me as Howard's unworthy wife, praising Clare after my death. Their words tested my patience. But I held my tongue, knowing the scores would speak. A nosy aunt nudged me, laughing. "Susie, did you take the exam too? Will you catch some of Clare's culture?" The crowd chuckled, and Howard's face tightened, embarrassed. In my past life, he'd lectured me for shaming him with my rural ways. Now, he leaned close, his voice low. "Susie, when we get to the city, learn from Clare. Read books, stop scheming." His words, echoing our past life, sparked a flicker of pain. My old self had craved his approval. But the reborn Susie was different, forged by betrayal and the revolution's harsh lessons. I met his gaze, my voice cool. "Howard, we'll see who the scholar is when the scores come. The route gap between your precious Clare and me might surprise you." My defiance silenced him, his eyes narrowing, perhaps sensing my reborn edge. Clare, overhearing, stiffened, her smile faltering. The villagers' laughter faded, their curiosity piqued by my confidence. My parents watched from the head table, my father's brow furrowed, my mother's expression unreadable. In my past life, they'd shamed me, favoring Clare after my death. My father's trust in my job changed for Howard, and my mother's recent silence hinted at change. Danny, lurking near Clare, avoided my gaze, his role in her scheme a secret I'd soon expose. The village's doubt, sparked by Howard's collapse, simmered beneath the feast's joviality. The revolution's call for equality had made them wary of city privilege, and I'd use that to amplify Clare's fall. I raised my glass, my voice clear to the exam, and the truth. The toast was innocuous, but my eyes locked on Clare, a challenge she couldn't ignore. She forced a smile, her fingers tight around her cup. The trap was in motion, and the scores would detonate it. The karmic force that reborn me wasn't just chance, but a reckoning, aligning with the era's demand for justice. Clare thought she could steal my future again. Howard thought he could balance us both. They were about to learn the cost of underestimating a rural girl reborn. The late July sun bathed Oak Tree Village in golden light, the air buzzing with anticipation. It was 1977, and the college entrance exam results, a verdict on dreams forged in the Cultural Revolution's waning days, were due. I, Susie, reborn with the truth of Howard and Clare's betrayal, stood outside the production team's office, my heart steady despite the crowd's clamor. My trap, filling my exam sheet with wrong answers to sabotage Clare's score theft, had been set. The karmic voice that granted me this second life whispered, take your chance. Today, Clare's facade would crumble, and the village would see her for the fraud she was. The Cultural Revolution had scarred China, exiling city youth like Howard and Clare to rural re-education, while dismissing locals like me as uncultured. The 1977 exam, a rare chance to escape the fields, had heightened tensions. City youth craved urban return, while rural hopefuls like me challenged their presumed superiority. In my past life, Clare stole my results, soaring to university with Howard while I toiled, raising our son. Her envious jab, too bad it's that village girl again, revealed her fear of my potential. Howard, reborn like me, aided her, his guilt from a past life closing his eyes to my worth. My trap, leveraging her scheme with Danny, would now expose her. The village loudspeaker crackled, and Mr. Chen, the deputy leader, emerged with a score sheet. Villagers and sent-down youth crowded around, their whispers a mix of hope and envy. Howard stood tall, his face calm, his reborn memory ensuring a top score. In a crisp blouse, Clare glowed with premature triumph, villagers already congratulating her. "Clare's off to the city," one shouted, raising a fist. My parents lingered nearby, my father's eyes cautious, my mother's expression unreadable. In my past life, they'd praised Clare after my death, shaming me. Now, my defiance at the feast had planted doubt. Mr. Chen cleared his throat. "Howard is the top scorer in the county, 380 points." The crowd cheered, unsurprised. Howard nodded faintly, his reborn confidence unshaken. I stepped forward, my voice clear. "Mr. Chen, my score?" He scanned the sheet, adjusting his glasses. "Susie, 250 points. A ripple of laughter broke out, led by a sent-down youth close to Clare. 250? That's barely passing. Howard's face tightened, embarrassed. "I told you to study, Susie," he muttered. "You can't be saved." I ignored the jabs, my eyes on Clare. And Clare, our village pride? Surely she beat me. Howard shot me a sharp look, annoyed. Of course she did. "Stop stirring trouble." The crowd leaned in, expectant. Mr. Chen flipped the sheet, his brow furrowing. He checked again, lips trembling. "Clare?" 0. A stunned silence fell, broken by a villager's echo. 0? Even random guesses would yield points. 0 was a deliberate failure. My trap had worked. Clare, swapping our papers via Danny, had inherited my wrong answers. Clare's face drained of color, her gaze snapping to Danny, who stood frozen, mouth agape. "Susie, how did you get 250? He blurted, exposing their plan. I shrugged, my tone light. 250 beats 0. The crowd erupted in whispers, and their faith in Clare shattered. 0? Her, a scholar? One scoffed. The revolution's call for equality fueled their scorn. City privilege was no excuse for fraud. Clare stammered, "This can't be." Her eyes, wide with panic, met mine, and I smiled faintly, letting her see my hand in this. Howard, confused, muttered, "This wasn't how it happened last time." His words confirmed his reborn status, his memory of Clare's past success now clashing with reality. He stepped toward Mr. Chen. "There's a mistake." Clare studied tirelessly, even while working. His guilt for her, rooted in a past life where he'd failed her, drove his defense. I seized the moment, my voice righteous. "He's right, Mr. Chen. What if someone sabotaged Clare's score? We must investigate." The villagers, reliant on Clare's promised city connections, nodded. "Yeah, find the cheater." Clare's body trembled, her pupils shrinking. "No, don't," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "Maybe it's my fate. I'll try again next year." Her panic betrayed her guilt, and the crowd's murmurs turned hostile. "Fate or fraud?" a farmer snapped. In a desperate bid to deflect, Clare bolted toward the riverbank, tears streaming. "I'd rather die than face this," she cried, splashing into the shallows. Villagers gasped, some rushing to pull her out. Her dramatic plunge only deepened suspicion, the revolution's distrust of city theatrics working against her. I stood back, my heart a mix of triumph and resolve. The pain of my past life, Clare's theft, Howard's neglect, had fueled this. But I wasn't just vengeful. I was a rural girl proving her worth. using the era's tensions to expose privilege. My parents watched, my father's caution shifting to pride, my mother's silence now thoughtful. Danny, his role exposed, would face his reckoning. The karmic force that reborn me was justice, aligning with the village's awakening. Claire's 0 was my victory. But the war wasn't over. Howard's reborn loyalty to her would be my next target. Autumn 1977 painted Beijing in hues of amber and rust, the city pulsing with the energy of a China emerging from the Cultural Revolution's shadow. I, Susie, reborn with the truth of Howard and Claire's betrayal, stood in a cramped off-campus room, its walls peeling but alive with possibility. The college entrance exam had reshaped our fates. Howard, the county's top scorer, had enrolled at Beijing University. Clare, branded a fraud with her 0 score, clung to Howard's promise to bring her along. And I, with my deliberate 250 points, had followed, enrolling for the next year's exam. The karmic voice that granted me this second life urged, "Take your chance." Here, I'd dismantle their dreams, starting with a fiery act of revenge. The Cultural Revolution had scattered city youth to rural exile, but its end and the 1977 exam's reinstatement had drawn them back to urban centers. Beijing buzzed with ambition, with students like Howard embodying the era's hope for renewal. In my past life, Claire stole my exam results, joining Howard at university while I toiled in Oak Tree Village, raising our son, who later called her mommy. Her envy, Howard's guilt from a reborn past where he failed her, and their shared city dreams had erased me. Now, my trap, giving Claire a 0, had humiliated her, but Howard's loyalty persisted. I'd strike deeper, using his weaknesses against him. Howard had rented me this room, a concession to keep me placated, while placing Claire in university staff dorms, claiming it aided her studies for next year's exam. His reborn plan was clear: balance his rural wife with his city muse, recreating their past life bond. I canceled Claire's dorm lease, leaving her homeless, a move I cloaked as an administrative error. She now scrambled for shelter, her scholarly facade crumbling. I, meanwhile, studied at a local prep school, my rural grit fueling my resolve. The revolution had taught me to seize opportunities, and Beijing was my new battlefield. That evening, Howard returned from classes, his law student polish marred by fatigue. "Susie," he said, eyeing my books, "you're still on about the exam? You should prepare for a baby." "That's what you wanted?" His words echoed our past life when he'd sidelined me with motherhood while strolling campus with Claire. The memory of our son, sweetly calling Claire mommy, sparked a cold rage. That child wouldn't exist in this life, not after their betrayal. I smiled thinly. "I'll take the exam, Howard. You focus on your studies." He frowned, sensing my defiance. I'd have begged for closeness in my past life, but now I saw his guilt for Claire as a flaw to exploit. I knew his allergy to chili peppers, a detail he'd hidden to seem robust. That night, as he showered, I slipped into the kitchen and soaked his drying underwear in chili oil, the pungent scent masked by the room's musty air. The revolution's resourcefulness, making do with little, guided my hands. By morning, Howard would feel my wrath, disguised as an innocent mishap. The next evening, he limped home, his face a mix of red and pale, legs stiff. Susie groaned, rushing to the bathroom. Something was wrong. I feigned concern, trailing him. At the campus clinic, the doctor peeled back his pants, wincing. Severe inflammation, chili allergy. This could affect urination, maybe fertility. I dropped to my knees, my voice theatrical. "Fertility? Doctor, will Howard be barren?" Students in the waiting area turned, whispering. "That's Howard from the law," one said. "Injured down there?" "Poor guy." My wails grew louder. "Howard, your fate's so cruel. Top law student, and now no heirs?" The doctor hushed me, but the damage was done. Rumors spread, dubbing Howard Broken Root a humiliating nickname that clung like damp Beijing smog. His reborn confidence, built on past life success, faltered, his social standing shaken. I stood, wiping fake tears, my heart thrumming with dark satisfaction. The revolution's class struggles had taught me to strike at privilege, and Howard's city-bred pride was no match for my rural cunning. Back in the room, Howard patched up but mortified, glared. Susie, you made a scene! His anger masked fear, of losing his reputation, of failing Clare again. I tilted my head, innocent. I was worried, Howard. You're my husband. My words, laced with irony, stung. In my past life, he'd lectured me for embarrassing him with my rural ways. Now I'd turned the tables, using public perception as my weapon. Clare, meanwhile, faced her struggles. Her homelessness a silent victory I'd amplify soon. Back in Oak Tree, my parents sent a letter, their tone shifting from shame to cautious pride in my exam pursuit. In my past life, they'd favored Clare, but my zero trap had opened their eyes. Danny, Clare's pawn, lingered in the village, his role in her scheme yet to be exposed. The karmic force that reborn me was a tide, carrying me toward justice. Unlike Oak Tree's fields, Beijing's urban sprawl offered new ways to unravel Howard and Clare. The chili prank was a spark. Next, I'd ignite their trust, using the city's gossip and my reborn foresight to bury their dreams. Winter's chill settled over Beijing in late 1977. The city's bustling streets starkly contrasted with Oak Tree Village's quiet fields. I, Susie, reborn with the truth of Howard and Clare's betrayal, stood in our off-campus room, its walls now familiar. The college entrance exam had reshaped our paths. Howard, tarnished by the broken root rumor after my chili sabotage, clung to his law studies. Clare, humiliated by her zero scores, scrabbled for footing, homeless after I canceled her dorm lease. And I, pursuing next year's exam, wove my revenge with precision. The karmic voice that granted me this second life urged, "Take your chance." I'd push Clare to ruin, using her desperation and Danny's delusion as my tools. The Cultural Revolution's end had sparked hope, with the 1977 exam drawing rural and urban youth to Beijing's universities, a symbol of renewal. But its class divides lingered. City elites like Howard and Clare saw rural folk like me as lesser, a bias I'd turned against them. In my past life, Clare stole my exam results, joining Howard at university while I raised our son, who later called her mommy. Her envy and Howard's reborn guilt, rooted in a past life where he failed her, had erased me. My zero-score trap exposed her fraud, and the chili prank humbled Howard. Now, Clare's desperation offered a new opening. Clare, cornered by homelessness, had begged to stay with us, claiming she'd care for Howard, still recovering from his allergy flare-up. I agreed, feigning kindness, but laced her daily love lunches for him with chili powder, knowing his sensitivity. At the hospital, Howard, flushed and coughing after eating, was rushed to the ICU. I stood in the hallway, facing Clare's anxious pacing and Howard's roommates, who snapped, "Susie, where were you? Clare's been at his bedside." I crossed my arms, voice sharp. "I may ask what Clare fed my husband." He was fine until her meal. A nurse approached, holding the lunchbox. "Who's the family?" "He's allergic to chili, so why feed him spicy food?" "He nearly didn't make it." Clare's face reddened, her defense faltering. I pointed, voice rising. "Clare, I took you in and you almost killed him? You're paying the ICU bills, hundreds of yuan, or I'll report you." The revolution's strict laws loomed large. Criminal liability was no idle threat. Clare's eyes widened, panic setting in. The roommates, unable to cover the cost, slipped away, leaving her isolated. "I've no money," she cried. I snorted. "A city girl like you can't scrape together a few hundred yuan?" Clare called her mother, a woman who'd faked illness in my past life to gain Howard's care. The line crackled, her mother's voice cold. "You failed the exam and racked up debts. Useless. Marry Chief Xing's son, he's waited years. A few hundred yuan's nothing then." Clare shook her head, pleading. "Mom, let me try the exam again." Her mother snapped, "A zero? You humiliated me. Marry him or you're done." The call ended, Clare's face hollow. She turned to me, voice low. "I'm forced to marry now, Susie." "Happy?" I gave a cold smile. "You made your choices, Clare." Her desperation was my leverage, but Danny was my next move. In my past life, he'd sabotaged my letters to Howard, smitten with Clare. Now, he was ripped for manipulation in Beijing on a village errand. I forged a letter from Clare, promising marriage if he joined her in southern business ventures, a lie echoing his past life boasts. I slipped it to him at a market, his eyes lighting up.
Thanks, Susie, he grinned, shoving a 10 yuan bill into my hand. Fueled by my forgery, his delusion would soon clash with Claire's new reality. Back at the hospital, Claire's plight deepened. Her forced engagement to Xing's son, a greasy man, loomed, her city dreams crumbling. In his sleep, Howard, stabilized but weak, muttered, "Claire, I failed you again." His reborn guilt, oblivious to my pain, stirred a flicker of regret in me. Not for him, but for the love I'd once poured into him. The revolution had taught me to question privilege, and Howard's loyalty to Clare was a relic of that bias. My parents, informed of my Beijing progress, sent walnuts and a letter, their pride growing, a shift from their past life shame. Now, in Beijing, Danny was a ticking bomb, his belief in Claire's love set to explode. I stood by Howard's bed, my resolve firm. The pain of my past, Claire's theft, Howard's neglect, had forged me. But I wasn't just vengeful. I was a rural girl reclaiming her worth, using Beijing's gossip and the era's shifting tides. The karmic force that reborn me was a current, pulling Clare and Howard toward ruin. Claire's fall was near, Danny's delusion my catalyst. The hospital's sterile air felt charged, a prelude to chaos. I'd orchestrated this, and soon their tangled lies would combust, leaving me to rise from their ashes. Winter's grip tightened on Beijing, the city's neon lights cutting through the January 1978 fog. I, Susie, reborn with the truth of Howard and Claire's betrayal, stood outside the city's first hospital, its sterile halls a stage for my final act. The college entrance exam had set this in motion. Howard, tarnished by the broken root rumor, lay weakened in the ICU from my chili sabotage. Claire, her 0 score exposing her fraud, faced a forced marriage to a wealthy man. Danny, deluded by my forged letter, believed Claire loved him. The karmic voice that granted me this second life whispered, "Take your chance." Today their lies would combust, and I'd face the cost of my vengeance. The Cultural Revolution's end had ushered in hope, with the 1977 exam drawing ambitious youth to Beijing's universities. But its class divides lingered. City elites like Howard and Claire saw rural folk like me as inferior, a bias I'd weaponized. In my past life, Claire stole my exam results, joining Howard at university while I raised our son, who called her mommy. Her envy and Howard's reborn guilt, tied to a past life where he failed her, had erased me.
My 0 score trap and chili prank had humiliated them, but Claire's desperation and Danny's delusion now set the stage for chaos. Inside the hospital, Howard lay semi-conscious, his fever spiking from the chili-laced lunch Claire delivered. I'd orchestrated this, knowing his allergy, and pinned the blame on her, demanding she pay ICU bills. Claire, now married to Chief Xing's son, a greasy man who'd paid 3,000 a win for her, arrived with 500 yuan, her red coat contrasting with her pale face. Danny, summoned by my call to deliver village walnuts, entered the ward, his eyes locking on Claire. My forged letter, promising Claire's love, had brainwashed him. The air crackled with tension, a powder keg ready to ignite. Claire approached Howard's bed, her voice soft. "Howard, I got the money. You'll be okay." Before he could respond, Danny lunged at her husband, fists flying. "You bastard, she's mine!" he roared, his delusion exploding. The man reeled, then slapped Claire hard. "You cheated on me?" he bellowed. Howard, stirred by the chaos, muttered deliriously, "Claire's my wife." His reborn memories blurred past and present, his guilt for her surfacing. The man turned, enraged, and punched Howard, who slumped unconscious. Claire, trying to intervene, caught a blow, blood gushing from her scalp as she collapsed. I screamed, running into the hallway. "Fight in the ward! Call the police!" My voice, theatrical yet calculated, drew nurses and patients. The ward descended into chaos. Danny and the man traded blows, blood staining the floor. Howard's monitor flatlined, medics rushing in too late. Claire lay unconscious, her red coat soaked redder. The police arrived, arresting Danny and the man, both bruised and bloodied. The incident, dubbed a tragic love triangle, hit Beijing's tabloids, scandalizing the university. Howard was dead, Claire injured, and Danny jailed, his business dreams shattered. I stood outside, the cold biting my skin, a storm of emotions swirling. Triumph surged. Clare's fraud and Howard's betrayal were exposed, their lives in ruins. But a pang of guilt pierced me. Howard's death, though unintended, was my doing. The chili prank was a spark that ignited this. I'd loved him in my past life, pouring my heart into a man who chose Clare. Now, his delirious claim, Clare's my wife, confirmed he'd never felt guilt for me. The revolution had taught me to fight privilege, but had I gone too far? I pushed the thought down, focusing on my survival. My parents informed me of the scandal and sent a letter from Oak Tree. Their pride in my exam pursuit is now firm, and their past shame of me is fading. They'd once favored Clare, but my actions had shifted their view. Clare's mother, who'd pressured her into marriage, cut contact, her art closed. The Village, reading tabloid reports, turned on Clare, her scholarly image a mockery. Danny, jailed, faced a grim future, his delusion my final weapon. The karmic force that reborn me was a reckoning, aligning with the era's demand for justice against privilege. I walked away from the hospital, Beijing's lights blurring in the fog. The pain of my past, Clare's theft, Howard's neglect, had driven me, but this victory was bittersweet. I dismantled their world, but Howard's death weighed on me, a reminder of my humanity. The revolution's aftermath, with its shifting social tides, had given me the stage to fight. Now I'd turn to my studies, the next exam, and the path to a new life. The chaos was behind me, but its echoes would linger, a testament to the cost of justice. Spring 1978 bloomed in Haichen, its cherry blossoms framing the university campus where I, Susie, now stood, a freshman at last. The scars of the Cultural Revolution were fading, but its legacy lingered in the air. Hope mingled with the weight of past struggles. I'd been reborn in Oak Tree Village a year ago, armed with the truth of Howard and Clare's betrayal. My revenge, trapping Clare with a 0 exam score, tarnishing Howard with a chili-fueled rumor, and sparking a fatal brawl, had dismantled their lives. The karmic voice that granted me this second chance whispered its final note. You've taken your chance. Now I faced a new dawn, my heart torn between triumph and the quiet cost of justice. The Cultural Revolution had upended China, exiling city youth like Howard and Clare to rural re-education while dismissing rural folk like me as inferior. The 1977 exam had been a battleground, its reinstatement symbolizing renewal. In my past life, Clare stole my results, joining Howard at university while I raised our son, who later called her mommy. Her envy and Howard's reborn guilt, rooted in a past where he failed her, had erased me. My schemes exposed their lies. Clare's 0 scores humiliated her, Howard's death ended his dreams, and Danny, deluded by my forged letter, languished in jail. Yet as I stood under a blossoming tree, the weight of my actions pressed heavy. I'd passed the 1978 exam with a solid score, earning a place in Haichen's university, a city vibrant with post-revolution ambition. The campus buzzed with students, their faces free of the rural toil I'd known. In my past life, I'd been a village wife, mocked for my lack of culture. I walked these halls, and my rural grit transformed into scholarly promise. The revolution's end had opened paths, but its class divides lingered in memory. City elites had once scorned me, yet I'd outsmarted them. My triumph was not just personal, but a defiance of a system that had deemed me lesser. Reflecting on the past year, I mourned the naive girl I'd been, pouring love into Howard only to be betrayed. His delirious cry, Clare's my wife, in his final moments confirmed his heart had never been mine. Clare's envy, revealed in her bitter words, had driven her to steal my future. But her forced marriage to a wealthy man and tabloid infamy had buried her dreams. Danny, her pawn, had sabotaged me in my past life, but my forged letter turned his devotion into his downfall. The brawl, sparked by his delusion, had cost Howard's life, a consequence I hadn't intended but couldn't regretfully. The pain of their betrayal justified my fight, but Howard's death left a shadow, a reminder of my humanity. Once ashamed of my rural roots, my parents had shifted to Oak Tree, their letters arriving weekly, brimming with pride. You've done us proud, Susie, my father wrote, a far cry from his past praise of Clare. My mother, once scornful, added, "You're more than we ever dreamed." Their change, sparked by my exam success and Claire's exposed fraud, closed their arc. Claire's mother, who'd pushed her into marriage, had severed ties, and her role ended. The village, reading of Claire's scandal, turned her into a cautionary tale. Her scholarly image mocked. Danny, jailed for the brawl, saw his business dreams crumble, his infatuation a fatal flaw. I sat on a campus bench, my books beside me, the blossoms drifting like soft promises. The karmic force that reborn me was more than chance, a call to right the wrongs of a fractured era. The revolution had taught me resilience, forging rural girls into fighters against privilege. My revenge, though brutal, was justice, leveling the scales for a girl dismissed as nothing. Yet Howard's death lingered a quiet ache. Had I become the hardness I despised in Clare? I shook my head, letting the thought dissolve. I'd fought for my worth, not just vengeance, and won. The campus bell rang, calling me to class. I stood, my books in hand, the weight of the past easing with each step. Hai Chen's streets, alive with vendors and bicycles, echoed China's new chapter. The revolution's scars were healing, and I, too, was starting anew. I'd buried the naive girl who loved Howard. The pain of her betrayal was now a lesson. My future, studies, dreams, a life unshadowed by their lies, stretched ahead. As I walked toward my dorm, the blossoms fell, a silent vow. I'd live for myself, my victory a testament to a rural girl reborn, unbroken and free.